So it's June, it's summer, it's warm as balls in here, I'm melting, and that could only mean one thing. It's Pride Month. So with it being Pride Month, and specifically my second Pride Month as a drag artist, I wanted to take at least one video to mark the occasion, and I thought I'd put together a small list of LGBTQIA plus horror movies. Before we jump into the list though, there's going to be something a little bit different about this video. So usually kind of when I'm talking about movies, I genuinely don't know what to do with my hands while I'm talking. I just kind of flail them around randomly. So to counteract that, I have decided to do my makeup on camera this time. Oh, and I should probably warn you, I will look closer to an egg than an actual drag queen, but that's just par for the course with drag. I mean, it could be a bit jarring. Maybe I should put a disclaimer up. Warning. The following presentation contains discussion of sensitive topics, graphic imagery, and Rogue's natural hairline. Viewer discretion is advised. Okay, you've been warned, so without further ado, we'll get into the list. 3, 2, 1. Let me get nice up and close for you so you can see how much of an abomination this is. So the first film on this list is a 1936 film titled Dracula's Daughter. So Dracula's Daughter, as the title might imply, focuses on a countess from Transylvania who seeks psychiatric help while she's experiencing some vampiric cravings. And yeah, by today's standards, the whole trope of vampirism being used as a metaphor for sexuality, that has definitely been done to death. But back then, you gotta think about it. I mean, you had Dracula, and then all of a sudden you have this lady who comes out of nowhere, and now she's experiencing the vampiric desires. And, you know, she doesn't go after men, she goes after other ladies. So, yeah, pretty iconic for the time, I would say. I had to turn on the fan. It's just too hot in here. I'll do my best to edit out the background noise, but if I can't do that, I'm so sorry. Please bear with me. So my next recommendation then is the 1971 Hammer horror movie Dr. Jekyll and Sister Hyde. And yeah, it's a Hammer horror flick, so you can definitely expect it to be goofy and I guess not take itself super seriously. But it's an interesting movie, I think, just because of the way it approaches gender. The one thing that sticks with me about this movie is Dr. Jekyll is, no spoilers, but Dr. Jekyll is definitely more confident as Sister Hyde after that whole transformation sequence. And as a drag artist, someone who likes to mess with gender in that kind of way, when I'm in drag, not that Sister Hyde is a draggy character or anything like that, but when I'm in drag, I definitely feel like 10 times more confident than I would usually be. So yeah, that's just something that stuck with me, something I think is interesting about this movie. I would highly recommend you check it out. Coming in at number 8... Sorry, this blending is taking forever, hold on. Coming in at number 8 then, we have Joel Schumacher's 1987 classic, The Lost Boys. And yeah, this movie follows the story of a mother and her 2 sons who move to a small Californian town to look after their grandpa. So yeah, the town is overrun by vampires. The older brother then gets lured away by the vampires, led by Kiefer Sutherland, and he gets turned into a vampire. Yeah. And this is very close to Dracula's Daughter in that it uses the whole vampirism thing as a metaphor for sexuality. So you could see the vampires kind of, they're very androgynous, by 80s standards anyway, I guess. They're very androgynous and they kind of lure the brother away and they kind of corrupt him, I guess you could say. So this is interesting because Joel Schumacher himself is I can't remember if he's gay or bi, but Joel Schumacher himself is a queer man. So his perspective on this is very interesting to say the least. There's a lot of interesting symbolism in this movie. There's lines as well about like, how far are you willing to go? So that kind of dialogue as well just kind of strengthens the whole queer subtext of the movie. And yeah, for vampy Jack Bauer, I would definitely recommend. Beauty is Pain. At number 7, we have The Slumber Party Massacre from 1982, written by Rita Mae Brown and directed by Amy Holden Jones. The Slumber Party Massacre follows the story of a bunch of girls who get together to have a slumber party for the weekend, the titular slumber party, and they realize they're being stalked by a power drill wielding madman. And though this movie is meant to be a satirical take on the slasher genre or the horror genre as a whole, I guess you could argue, the movie is also super queer because being written by Rita Mae Brown, who was a proud lesbian and outspoken feminist, she writes women in traditionally masculine roles, kind of giving the middle finger to gender stereotypes. She also does a good job at kind of, it's not only for the women, she also kind of inverts the male roles as well. She also does a really good job at like poking humorous fun at female sexuality, which for 1982, pretty unheard of. I talk about that a bit more in my video, so I'll be sure to link that somewhere. So I really wasn't sure whether or not I should include this movie in the video because it's, looking at it through today's lens, it's actually pretty controversial, I would say, or at least I think. I had a look on Letterboxd, and a lot of the queer people I follow, they seem to like this movie, like it's getting high ratings, but I just don't know how I feel about it. The movie is Sleepaway Camp from 1983, directed by Robert Hitchcock, and it's, my opinion aside, it's a very interesting movie just because it approaches both homosexuality and gender in an interesting way, and I think that's about all I can say without going into spoilers. Yeah, I mean, this movie just, I don't know, it plays into a trope that I really hate. I can't even name the trope without spoiling it. This movie, I think it's going to give you a lot to talk about. It's not necessarily a good time, but I think this movie is kind of essential viewing. Just if you are interested in queer cinema and horror in general, this movie is going to give you a lot to talk about, especially looking at it through today's lens. So I recommend it, but solely from I guess, a morbid curiosity standpoint. But yeah, watch it, and then when you're traumatized, at me on Twitter and let me know what you think. It's kind of coming together. I'm starting to feel kind of cute. Progress. That took forever. Okay, I think this is about as good as I'm going to get my eyes. But I haven't talked about movies in like 40 minutes. So, number 5 on my list is The Babadook from 2014. It's a movie that follows the story of a... Oh, there's too much pattern on this brush. It's a movie that follows the story of a grieving widow who also has to take care of a little shit of a kid. But that kid is afraid of monsters, and the mom is all like, oh, don't be so stupid, don't be afraid of monsters, there's no such thing as monsters. Clearly. Oh, one of my curls popped out. And The Babadook is a unique entry on this list because it doesn't paint itself, pun intended, as a queer movie in the sense that there is any LGBTQIA subtext or themes or plots or anything like that. No, this movie is a queer horror movie, and The Babadook is a queer icon because the internet says so. So back in like 2014, 2015 era, The Babadook shows up on Netflix under LGBT movies, missing the QIA plus back then, obviously. And clearly it's a typo, you would assume, but a bunch of people took to Tumblr because that's what you did back then. So a battle of wits ensues, and there are people who are pro Babadook is gay and people who are against Babadook is gay. And historically, since you're watching this video, you could assume which side won. And yeah, now the Babadook is a gay icon. History lessons with Rogue Aurora. Coming in at number 4 then, you have one of the movies that made me a horror fan, and it is Hellraiser, directed by Clive Barker. And in case you are like brand new to the genre and you have not seen Hellraiser, it follows the story of an unfaithful wife who finds the zombie of her former lover while he's being hunted down by essentially demons from another world. And these demons, the Xenobites, or Xenobites I think is another pronunciation, they're pretty obvious avatars of like queer and counterculture characters. Taking one look at Pinhead and the other Xenobites and the way they're dressed up in leather and different kind of body modifications, I guess you could say, and body horror more specifically. A pretty obvious nod to kind of Clive Barker's identity as a gay man. It's one of those movies where after I watch, like, I love it. I love rewatching it, especially with friends. But as well, it's also a movie that I just feel dirty after I watch it. Like, I enjoy watching it, but I don't. You know, that kind of way? There we go. Those are the clam lips I'm looking for. Okay, I think just some lashes, maybe a bit of nose contour, and then we are Dunyan rings with this. Okay, while I'm cleaning this brush, number 3 on our list is Jennifer's Body, a 2009 horror comedy written by Diablo Cody and directed by Corinne Kusama. And it follows the story of a young demonic diva who devours the young men in her town. It mainly focuses on the relationship between the two best friends of the story, Jennifer and Needy. And their relationship is so complicated, so complex, it's very passionate. These two are like fire and ice to each other. They contrast off each other. It gets confusing sometimes to the point where they almost confuse it with love. And Diablo Cody, the writer, has come out and said that she herself has experienced relationships in her past with friends that were so intense that it could be compared to the feeling of love. And she does an excellent job at depicting that here. I did a video on this not too long ago, and it's still fresh in my mind. I have a lot to say about it, so if you want to see my full thoughts on this movie, maybe go to that video. Ooh, what if we put a bit of blush on the nose? Yeah, just like that. Yes, baby. While I'm preparing my lashes, number 2 on our list, and I'm sure you knew this was going to be here, is A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2, Freddy's Revenge. It follows the story of a family that move into Nancy's house after the events of the first Nightmare on Elm Street movie. And I'm pretty sure it's the most infamously gay horror movie of all time. And I say infamous for a number of reasons. First of all, the movie came out and people saw that it was not a traditionally masculine male in the lead role, which for a slasher at the time was pretty unorthodox. And this is kind of a loaded reaction as well, because the actor Mark Patton, who played Jesse in the movie, he was a closeted actor at the time, and it wasn't really a safe space in Hollywood yet for actors to come out. They wouldn't get the praise that they would get today.
Hi, Editing Rogue here. I just wanted to pop in and make a quick correction. I said that nowadays actors are praised for coming out, and that is far from the truth. I more so meant that it's more socially acceptable for actors to be out and proud now than it was back then. That's all.
It was a pretty rough situation for Mark because he thought the role in this movie would be his big break, but it ended up kind of being the end of his career. And as a result, it's kind of sad. I don't want to make this too sad, but there's a good documentary on just the events and the reception of this movie. I believe the documentary is called Scream Queen, My Nightmare on Elm Street. I'll link to it below if I can find it. Essentially, in this movie, Freddy serves as a metaphor for Jesse's sexuality. And there are some pretty on-the-nose scenes where it's literally Freddy bursting out through Jesse in a dream sequence. And kind of Jesse's, we have that symbolism of Jesse's inner demons coming out to play. That, and there is just a lot of homoerotic scenes in this movie. It's just super gay. And apparently the director tries to maintain that the homoerotic subtext was unintentional and it was actually brought to the table by Mark Patton. But, sweetie, no. Just know there's way too much happening in this movie for you to say it was unintentional. We don't believe you. Okay, I think I'm finally happy enough with this look, so I'm going to go get into the outfit you saw me in earlier and actually put on a bit of foundation here as well. So I'll be back in 2 ticks for the final movie on the list. And this is the reveal. What do we think? I can only see it in the tiny camera monitor right now, but I think I love it. And the movie I have chosen for my number 1 spot in this list is the 2004 comedy horror movie Seed of Chucky. And I chose this movie because it has an interesting approach to gender and kind of different identity issues, but also because Jennifer Tilly. Just Jennifer Tilly, that's all. This movie is very queer because Jennifer Tilly is an icon. That is all you need to know. Okay, fine, if you're pressing me for more details. Seed of Chucky is the sequel, technically the 5th Child's Play movie, but the sequel to Bride of Chucky. It follows the child of Tiff and Chucky, Glenn or Glenda, which, if you're a hashtag true horror fan, you would know is an Ed Wood reference. So it's got that going for it, but this movie tackles gender identity in a very insane way. You have the child of Tiff and Chucky, who the seed, if you will, who is having an identity crisis and doesn't know how they identify gender wise. So you have them come up with two names, Glenn or Glenda, and it's this movie's iconic because Tiff and Chucky, two psychotic murder dolls, are better at addressing gender issues than most parents today. So yeah, that's a serve. Also, Jennifer Tilly plays a psychotic murder doll in this movie who has an obsession with Jennifer Tilly in the movie, and Jennifer Tilly plays herself, who is playing a psychotic murder doll in the movie. I mean, how much more meta can you get? This movie is perfect. And sadly, that is all we have time for today. I had a lot of fun making this list for you guys. So if there are any other queer horror movies that you think are iconic or that I might have missed, please, please, please share them with me. Also, if you liked me doing my makeup while talking about this, it's a format I'm thinking of doing more. So yeah, if you liked it, please feel free to let me know down below. In the meantime, if you want to see more horror and more drag, be sure to subscribe and give this video a like. I would really appreciate it. Until next time, stay glamorous, stay ghoulish.